8-year-old Tyler climbed into my truck after his weekly family dinner. But instead of chattering about dessert or his cousins, silent tears streaked down his cheeks. When I asked what happened, his voice cracked as he whispered the words that shattered my heart. "Grandma told me to wait in the car because I embarrassed the family. For 3 hours, my son had sat alone in 90-degree heat, while everyone else enjoyed the buffet inside. That night, I made a decision that would change everything between my parents and me forever." I pulled over into the parking lot of a gas station, my hands trembling on the steering wheel. Tyler sat beside me, still sniffling his small fingers clutching the edge of his booster seat. The summer heat had left red marks across his forehead, where he'd pressed against the car window waiting for a family that had deliberately excluded him. "Tell me exactly what happened, buddy," I said, keeping my voice steady, despite the rage building in my chest. Tyler wiped his nose with the back of his hand. "We got to Golden Corral, and everyone was getting out of their cars. Grandma Dorothy looked at me and told you she'd handle everything while you went to park. Then she grabbed my arm really tight and said I needed to stay in the car because I might act weird around other people and make everyone uncomfortable." My heart sank deeper with each word. "Did anyone else hear her say this?" "Aunt Patricia was right there. She just nodded and said it was probably for the best since Madison and Cooper were getting recognized for their honor roll achievements. Grandpa Frank gave me his old phone to play games on and said I'd be fine." I closed my eyes, remembering how my mother, Dorothy, had always been obsessed with appearances. Even as a kid, she'd criticized everything from my posture to my choice of friends. But I never imagined she'd turn that toxic perfectionism on my grieving son. "How long were you out there?" "Tyler," I watched the clock on the phone. 3 hours and 17 minutes. I got really thirsty, but all the doors were locked. Some people walking by looked at me funny, and I felt embarrassed sitting there alone. The image of my 8-year-old son trapped in a hot car while his own family celebrated without him made my stomach turn. Tyler had been struggling since his mother, Sarah, died 2 years ago. He'd become quieter, more sensitive sometimes, overwhelmed in social situations. Instead of supporting him through his grief, my parents had apparently decided he was an inconvenience. I thought about all the times I'd dropped Tyler off for these family dinners, grateful that my parents were maintaining a relationship with their grandson, while I worked extra electrician shifts to keep our heads above water. I'd been paying their mortgage payment of $850 every month since my father Frank's pension couldn't cover their expenses after the economy tanked. I also covered their car insurance at $240 monthly and helped with medical copays that averaged around $300 each month. "Tyler, has anything like this happened before?" He looked down at his sneakers. "Last month at Aunt Patricia's barbecue, I spilled grape juice on my shirt. Grandma made me sit in the bathroom during dinner because she said I looked messy and might embarrass everyone in front of the neighbors. I ate my hot dog alone on the toilet seat." My hands clenched into fists. "What else?" 2 weeks ago, when Madison and Cooper had their birthday party, Patricia told me to play outside in the backyard by myself. She said the celebration was for special children, and I should stay away from the presents and cake until everyone left. I watched through the sliding glass door while they opened gifts. Each revelation felt like a punch to the gut. My son had been systematically excluded from family gatherings, while I unknowingly funded their lives. The financial support I provided allowed them to live comfortably, while they emotionally abused my child. Tyler reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled children's menu from the restaurant. On the back, he'd drawn a picture in crayon of a small stick figure standing outside a building, while other figures sat around a table inside. At the bottom, in his careful 8-year-old handwriting, were the words, "I'm sorry I'm bad." That's when I broke. My son, who'd already lost his mother in a senseless car accident, believed he was fundamentally flawed because the people who should have loved him unconditionally had convinced him he was an embarrassment. The boy who used to laugh constantly before Sarah's death, who built elaborate Lego cities and told imaginative stories, had been reduced to apologizing for his own existence. I pulled Tyler into a hug, feeling his small body shake against mine. You are not bad, Tyler. You are perfect exactly as you are. What they did to you was wrong, and it's never going to happen again. As I held my son in that gas station parking lot, I realized that my family hadn't just betrayed Tyler. They'd betrayed the memory of Sarah, who would have been horrified to see her child treated this way. The woman who dedicated her life to making Tyler feel loved and secure was gone, and her own in-laws had stepped in to tear down everything she'd built. That night, as I tucked Tyler into bed, he asked, "Daddy, why don't they love me like they love Madison and Cooper?" I didn't have an answer that would make sense to an 8-year-old mind. How could I explain that some adults choose cruelty over kindness, that some people mistake control for love? Instead, I promised him that things were going to change, that he would never again have to earn affection from people who should have given it freely. But as I sat in my living room after Tyler fell asleep staring at the picture he'd drawn, I knew that change would require more than just words. It would require action that might cost me the only family I had left. The next morning, I called Tyler's school counselor, Mrs. Henderson, requesting an immediate meeting. She agreed to see me during her lunch break, and the conversation that followed opened my eyes to the full extent of the damage my family had caused. "I've been meaning to contact you, Mr. Abram," Mrs. Henderson said, settling into her chair across from me. "Tyler has shown some concerning changes in his behavior and schoolwork over the past few months." She pulled out a folder thick with Tyler's assignments and notes. He's been writing stories and completing creative writing prompts that consistently focus on themes of isolation and rejection. Last week, he wrote a story about a boy who lived alone because his family thought he was broken. My stomach dropped as she showed me Tyler's work. One assignment asked students to write about their heroes, and Tyler had written about kids who are brave enough to sit alone. Another asked about family traditions, and Tyler described waiting outside while other people have fun. He's also been asking unusual questions, Mrs. Henderson continued. He wanted to know if there were families that didn't have disappointing kids, and whether children could choose new relatives if their current ones didn't want them. The counselor opened another section of the folder. 2 weeks ago, Tyler told me during one of our sessions that his family thinks he's been different since his mother died. He said they're trying to help him become normal again, but he doesn't know how to fix what's wrong with him. Hearing my son's words repeated back to me was devastating. Tyler had been internalizing every cruel comment, every exclusion, every moment of rejection as evidence of his own inadequacy. "I've been documenting these conversations because I was planning to call you," Mrs. Henderson said gently. Children experiencing grief often struggle with self-worth, but Tyler's statements suggested external influences reinforcing negative self-perception. After leaving the school, I drove straight to my sister Patricia's house in the affluent suburb where she lived with her husband and 2 children. Patricia answered the door in tennis attire, clearly annoyed by the unscheduled visit. "Abram, what's this about? I have a country club lunch in 20 minutes. "We need to talk about Tyler," I said, stepping inside without invitation. Patricia's expression shifted to defensive irritation. "Look, if this is about yesterday, we were trying to protect everyone involved. Tyler gets overwhelmed in restaurant settings, and we couldn't risk him having a meltdown during Madison's celebration. Protect everyone from what an 8-year-old boy who lost his mother. From the embarrassment," Patricia snapped. "Tyler doesn't understand appropriate social behavior anymore. He cries at inappropriate times, he doesn't engage properly with other children, and frankly, it makes everyone uncomfortable." I stared at my sister, barely recognizing the woman who used to sneak me extra cookies when we were children. "So your solution is to lock him in a car during family gatherings. Our solution is to manage the situation until you get him proper help. Madison and Cooper shouldn't have their special moments ruined because Tyler can't control his emotions." Patricia walked to her granite kitchen counter and leaned against it casually, as if we were discussing the weather. "Look, Mom and Dad are getting older. They don't have the energy to deal with a troubled child during what should be enjoyable family time. We've all agreed that Tyler needs professional intervention before he can participate in group activities again. All agreed. You mean you've been discussing this behind my back? We've been trying to help you see that you're in denial about Tyler's problems. You've been so focused on being the grieving widower that you haven't noticed how his behavior affects other people. The casual cruelty of her words left me speechless. This wasn't concern for Tyler's well-being. This was cold calculation disguised as family support. Last month, Tyler cried during Cooper's piano recital. Patricia continued. It was completely inappropriate and disrupted the entire performance. That's when we realized he can't handle public events anymore. He cried because the music reminded him of his mother. Sarah used to play piano for him every night before bed. Exactly. He's stuck in his grief and you're enabling it instead of helping him move forward. We think he might benefit from residential treatment where he can learn proper coping mechanisms. The suggestion of sending my son away hit me like a physical blow. They weren't just excluding Tyler from family gatherings. They were planning to remove him from my life entirely. As I prepared to leave, Patricia's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced at it, and her face flushed slightly. Mom wants to know if you're planning to keep Tyler home from Sunday dinner this week. She's making Cooper's favorite meal to celebrate his science fair win. And where exactly would Tyler be during this celebration? Patricia shrugged. He could stay home with a babysitter, or maybe it's time to consider that residential program we discussed. There's a place in Arizona that specializes in children with adjustment disorders. Walking back to my truck, I felt the full weight of their betrayal. My family had systematically convinced themselves that Tyler was the problem, that his grief was an inconvenience to be managed, rather than a natural response to devastating loss. They'd crafted a narrative where they were the reasonable adults making hard choices for everyone's benefit. But as I drove home, I realized that Patricia had accidentally revealed something important. They were coordinating these decisions, planning Tyler's exclusion in advance. This wasn't spontaneous management of difficult situations. It was deliberate emotional abuse disguised as family concern. That evening, I sat down with Tyler to ask more questions about his experiences with his grandparents and aunt. Each answer revealed another layer of systematic rejection. They'd been training him to accept isolation as normal, to believe that love was conditional on perfect behavior. Tyler mentioned that Grandma Dorothy often said things like, "Maybe next time you'll remember to behave properly," and "Your cousins don't have these problems because they know how to act right." Aunt Patricia had told him that some children need extra help learning how to be part of a family. As I listened to my son recount months of psychological manipulation, I realized that my financial support had been enabling their abuse. Every mortgage payment I'd made had allowed them to maintain their comfortable lifestyle while destroying my child's self-worth. Every insurance premium I'd covered had given them the security to treat Tyler as disposable. The most painful realization was that they'd been using Sarah's death as justification for their cruelty. Instead of helping Tyler navigate his grief, they'd weaponized it against him, treating his sadness as evidence of fundamental brokenness rather than natural human emotion. That night, as Tyler slept, I began planning my response. If my family wanted to treat my son as expendable, they were about to learn that their financial security was equally fragile. 3 days after my confrontation with Patricia, my phone rang during breakfast. The caller ID showed Uncle Robert's number, and I answered expecting casual family conversation. Instead, I found myself in the middle of an intervention I hadn't requested. "Abram, your mother called me about Tyler's situation." Uncle Robert began without preamble. "She's deeply concerned about his behavioral issues and thinks you might need professional guidance to help him through this difficult period." I set down my coffee cup carefully. "What exactly did she tell you about Tyler's behavior?" "Well, she mentioned he's been having emotional outbursts during family gatherings, disrupting special occasions, and showing signs of serious adjustment problems since Sarah passed. Dorothy thinks he might benefit from residential treatment to help him develop better coping mechanisms." Uncle Robert continued with the tone of someone delivering difficult but necessary advice. She's worried that you're too close to the situation to see how much Tyler is struggling. Sometimes grief counseling isn't enough, and children need more intensive intervention. Has Tyler ever displayed problematic behavior when you've been around him? There was a pause. Well, I haven't seen him much lately. Dorothy mentioned he's been too unstable for family visits. But she's his grandmother, Abram. She knows children and she's raised successful kids. If she thinks Tyler needs help, maybe you should consider her perspective. After ending the call, I realized my mother had launched a comprehensive campaign to reframe Tyler's exclusion as necessary medical intervention. She'd positioned herself as the concerned grandmother trying to help a struggling family while painting me as a father in denial about his child's serious problems. Over the next week, the calls continued. Cousin Marcus offered to take Tyler for the summer to give me a break from the stress. Aunt Linda suggested a therapeutic boarding school she'd heard about. Family friend Janet mentioned she'd been praying for Tyler's healing after Dorothy shared his struggles at their book club. Each conversation revealed how thoroughly my mother had seeded the extended family with her version of events. According to Dorothy's narrative, Tyler was severely disturbed, I was overwhelmed and unable to cope, and drastic measures were needed to save us both from a deteriorating situation. The most devastating call came from Sarah's sister, Jennifer, who lived 2 hours away in Sacramento. She'd been trying to maintain a relationship with Tyler since Sarah's death, but her attempts had been systematically blocked. Abram, I've been trying to invite Tyler for sleepovers for months, but your mother told me he's too emotionally unstable for overnight visits. She said his grief counselor recommended limiting disruptions to his routine. My hands tightened around the phone. Tyler doesn't have a grief counselor, and he's never been diagnosed with any emotional instability. What but Dorothy sent me articles about childhood trauma and suggested I give you space to handle Tyler's treatment without additional family pressure. She said you were considering residential care. Jennifer's voice grew concerned. I've been sending birthday gifts and holiday packages through your parents' house since Dorothy said direct contact might overwhelm Tyler. Have you been getting them? No, we haven't received anything from you in over a year. The silence on the line stretched painfully. Abram, I've sent over $2,000 worth of gifts through your mother. Science kits, books, games, clothing. Everything went to their house because Dorothy insisted on screening Tyler's mail for potentially triggering content. As Jennifer described the gifts Tyler had never received, I felt another layer of betrayal settle over me. Sarah's family had been trying to maintain loving contact with Tyler, but my mother had intercepted their efforts while simultaneously telling them that I preferred isolation. There's something else, Jennifer continued hesitantly. Your mother called our church and asked the prayer group to pray for Tyler's mental health recovery. She told them he'd been having violent episodes and that you were struggling to keep him safe. The word violent hit me like a physical blow. Tyler had never shown even a hint of aggression. His response to grief had been withdrawal and sadness, not anger. But Dorothy had chosen the most frightening possible description to ensure maximum sympathy and minimum questioning. She also contacted Tyler's previous teacher from kindergarten claiming she was updating medical records. Mrs. Patterson called me afterward because she was confused. She remembered Tyler as a sweet, quiet child who'd never caused any problems. I hung up from Jennifer's call feeling dizzy with rage. My mother hadn't just excluded Tyler from family gatherings. She'd systematically destroyed his relationships with everyone who might offer him love and support. She'd isolated him from Sarah's family, while simultaneously building a case for his removal from my care. That afternoon, I drove to Tyler's school and requested a meeting with the principal. I needed to know if my mother's manipulation had extended into Tyler's educational environment. Principal Martinez listened carefully as I explained the situation, then pulled Tyler's complete file. No one from your family has contacted us about behavioral concerns, but we did receive a strange phone call about 3 weeks ago. She consulted her notes. A woman claiming to be Tyler's grandmother called asking about incidents involving emotional outbursts or disruptive behavior. She mentioned she was helping coordinate his care and wanted to ensure the school was properly supporting his special needs. What did you tell her? We informed her that Tyler is a model student who's never had disciplinary issues. He's quiet and sometimes seems sad, but his academic performance is excellent, and he gets along well with classmates and teachers. Principal Martinez frowned at her notes. The caller seemed surprised by our response. She asked if we were certain we were talking about the right child and suggested we might not be recognizing signs of underlying problems. The image of my mother questioning Tyler's teachers about non-existent behavioral issues filled me with fury. She'd been building a documentary case against my son, shopping for professional opinions that would support her narrative of his dysfunction. There's one more thing, Principal Martinez said. The caller mentioned that Tyler might need to change schools soon due to his family situation. She wanted to know about transferring his records to a residential facility. Driving home, I realized the scope of my mother's manipulation extended far beyond family dinners. She'd been systematically undermining Tyler's support network while preparing the groundwork for his removal from my custody. Every person she'd contacted had been given a carefully crafted story, designed to make Tyler seem dangerous and me seem incompetent. The most chilling realization was that Dorothy had been planning this campaign for months. This wasn't a spontaneous reaction to Tyler's grief. It was a calculated strategy to reshape our family according to her preferences. She'd decided Tyler was inconvenient, and she was prepared to destroy his entire world to eliminate that inconvenience. That evening, I sat Tyler down for another conversation about his experiences with his grandparents. This time I asked specifically about phone calls and conversations he might have overheard. Grandma Dorothy talks to Aunt Patricia on the phone a lot when I'm there, Tyler said. Last week I heard her say something about getting me proper help so the family could function normally again. She said you love me too much to see that I need professional intervention. My 8-year-old son looked up at me with eyes far too serious for his age. Daddy, what's professional intervention? Does it mean doctors are going to take me away from you? In that moment, I realized that Tyler had been living with the fear of abandonment for months. While I'd been working extra hours to support my parents financially, they'd been convincing my son that his removal from our family was not only possible, but necessary. The time for gentle conversations and family diplomacy had ended. My mother had declared war on my child, and I was finally ready to fight back. Saturday morning, I drove to the bank where I'd been automatically transferring money to my parents' account for the past 2 years. I needed to understand exactly how much I'd been contributing to people who were systematically destroying my son's emotional well-being. The bank manager, Linda Chen, pulled up my account history and printed detailed statements. As I reviewed the numbers, the scope of my financial entanglement became clear. Beyond the regular $850 mortgage payments, I'd covered emergency dental work totaling $1,200 appliance repairs, costing $800, and property tax payments of $2,000 over the past 12 months. You've transferred over $38,000 to this account in the past 2 years, Linda said, studying the printouts. That's a significant portion of your income. As I absorbed the total, my phone rang. Frank's number appeared on the screen, and I answered to find my father in a panic. Abram, thank God you picked up. The mortgage company called this morning about a potential rate adjustment. They want to discuss our payment capacity, and I realized we don't have any documentation of income beyond your monthly transfers. My father's voice carried the desperation of a man facing financial ruin. Son, we've been depending on your help for longer than I care to admit. Without your payments, we'll lose the house within 90 days. Your mother and I don't have any savings left after the medical bills and property maintenance. Dad, did you know that Mom has been telling people Tyler is mentally unstable? There was a long pause. She's concerned about the boy, Abram. We all are. He's been different since Sarah died, and Dorothy thinks he might need professional help to work through his grief properly. Different. How can you give me specific examples of problematic behavior you've personally witnessed? Another pause, longer this time. Well, I haven't spent as much individual time with Tyler lately. Dorothy handles most of the family interactions, but she's mentioned that he gets emotional at inappropriate times and doesn't respond well to social situations. My father's evasive answers revealed that he'd been accepting Dorothy's characterizations without independent observation. Like Uncle Robert and the other family members, Frank had been manipulated into supporting a narrative based entirely on my mother's reports. Dad, has Tyler ever been disruptive or inappropriate when you've interacted with him directly? No, Frank admitted quietly. He's always been polite and well-behaved around me, but Dorothy says he acts differently when more people are present. She thinks crowds trigger his emotional problems. After ending the call, I realized my father was trapped between financial necessity and moral conflict. He knew Tyler wasn't the problem child Dorothy described, but he couldn't afford to challenge her version of events because their survival depended on my continued financial support. An hour later, Patricia called with her own emergency. "Abram, I just got off the phone with Mom. She's hysterical about some mortgage situation. What's going on?" "I'm evaluating the family financial arrangements," I said carefully. "Well, you need to know that Mom and Dad have been helping us with Madison and Cooper's private school tuition. If something happens to their income, we won't be able to keep the kids in their current school." This revelation struck me like lightning. I'd been indirectly funding my niece and nephew's education, while my parents told everyone that Tyler was too problematic for family inclusion. My money had been supporting Patricia's children's opportunities while financing Tyler's exclusion from family life. "How much have they been contributing to your children's education?" "About $15,000 annually, plus they've helped with vacation costs and some emergency expenses. Brad's commission income has been unpredictable, so we've needed the extra support." Patricia's casual admission that she'd been benefiting from my financial contributions while supporting Tyler's exclusion filled me with rage. She'd been living comfortably off my electrician salary while treating my son like damaged goods. "Patricia, if Mom and Dad can afford to contribute $15,000 to your kids' education, why do they need mortgage assistance from me?" "Because they're using your money to help us," she said, apparently not recognizing the irony. "Look, Abram, we're all family here. Your financial support helps everyone, and everyone contributes according to their abilities. What exactly do you contribute?" Silence stretched across the phone line. Finally, Patricia said, "I contribute by helping Mom and Dad manage family situations that are beyond their capacity, like dealing with Tyler's behavioral issues." The circular logic was breathtaking. I provided money which enabled financial support for Patricia's family, which justified Patricia's authority to exclude my son from family activities, which created the problems that supposedly necessitated my financial contributions. That afternoon, I met with family attorney David Walsh, who specialized in financial disputes and custody matters. Walsh reviewed the documentation I'd gathered and listened to my description of the family situation with growing concern. "Mr. Abram, what you're describing sounds like a coordinated effort to undermine your parental rights while maintaining financial dependency. Your mother's false reports to extended family and school officials could potentially be used to challenge your custody." Walsh studied the financial records. "You've essentially been supporting your parents' household while they've been using those funds to benefit your sister's family. Meanwhile, they've been building a case that your son is problematic and you're an inadequate parent. What are my legal options?" "First, you can immediately terminate all financial support without legal consequences. You have no formal obligation to support your parents. Second, we need to document their false statements about Tyler's mental health and behavior. If they've been spreading lies that could affect your custody or Tyler's reputation, we may have grounds for civil action." Walsh opened a legal pad and began outlining strategy. "Third, we should consider whether their actions constitute emotional abuse of a minor. Systematically excluding a child from family activities while telling him he's fundamentally flawed could have legal consequences. As Walsh explained the potential legal ramifications of my family's behavior, I realized they'd been operating under the assumption that I would never challenge their authority. They'd expected me to continue providing financial support while accepting their judgment about Tyler's place in the family hierarchy. "There's one more concern," Walsh said. "If your sister and parents are facing financial difficulties due to the end of your support, they might escalate their claims about Tyler's problems. Desperate people sometimes make desperate choices." Walking to my truck after the legal consultation, I felt the weight of decision approaching. My family had spent 2 years building a financial dependency while systematically abusing my child. They'd used my money to create the very lifestyle that made them feel entitled to exclude Tyler from family participation. The next phase would require ending not just the financial support, but the entire toxic relationship that had been destroying my son's sense of worth. As I drove home to Tyler, I knew that within days, my parents would learn that their comfortable retirement depended on treating my child with basic human dignity. The choice between family harmony and my son's well-being had never really been a choice at all. Monday morning, I took a personal day from work and began building my case with methodical precision. Attorney Walsh had provided a checklist of documentation needed to protect Tyler and expose the manipulation campaign my family had orchestrated. My first stop was Tyler's pediatrician's office, where I requested all communication logs and medical records. Dr. Sarah Kim, who'd been Tyler's physician since birth, reviewed her files with growing concern. "Mr. Abram, I have 3 separate inquiry calls logged from someone claiming to be Tyler's grandmother over the past 4 months. Each caller requested information about Tyler's mental health status and asked whether I'd noticed signs of behavioral disorders." Dr. Kim pulled up the detailed notes she'd made after each call. "The caller seemed frustrated when I explained that Tyler is developing normally and shows typical grief responses for a child who lost his mother. She specifically asked about medication recommendations and whether I thought residential treatment might be beneficial. What was your response?" I explained that Tyler's emotional responses are completely appropriate for his situation. Grief isn't a mental illness, and residential treatment would be traumatic for a child who's already experienced significant loss. The caller argued with my assessment and suggested I might not be recognizing underlying problems. Dr. Kim frowned at her notes. "The most concerning call came 2 weeks ago. The same woman called claiming Tyler had displayed violent tendencies at family gatherings and asking if I could provide documentation supporting emergency psychiatric evaluation. My hands clenched around the arms of my chair. My mother had been shopping for medical professionals willing to pathologize Tyler's normal grief response. Doctor, I need you to know that Tyler has never displayed violent behavior of any kind. His grief responses have been withdrawal and sadness, never aggression. That's consistent with everything I've observed during his appointments. Tyler is a gentle child processing loss in healthy ways. Someone has been providing false information about his behavior." After leaving the pediatrician's office, I drove to Tyler's school for a comprehensive meeting with his teacher's counselor and principal. I explained the situation and requested detailed documentation of Tyler's actual school performance and behavior. Mrs. Rodriguez, Tyler's current teacher, pulled out her assessment files. "Tyler is one of my most conscientious students. He's quiet but participates appropriately in class discussions. His academic performance is above grade level, and he interacts kindly with his classmates." She showed me examples of Tyler's recent work, including creative writing assignments, that revealed his thoughtful, sensitive nature. The only concerning element I've noticed is that Tyler sometimes writes about feeling different from other children. When I've asked him to elaborate, he says his family thinks he needs to get better before he can participate in normal activities. Mrs. Henderson, the school counselor, added her observations. "Tyler has never required disciplinary intervention. His emotional regulation is appropriate for his age and circumstances. If anything, he's remarkably resilient considering his loss." Principal Martinez provided written statements from every teacher who'd worked with Tyler, unanimously describing him as well-behaved, academically capable, and emotionally stable. We'll provide whatever documentation you need to counter false claims about Tyler's school behavior. My next stop was Sarah's sister Jennifer's house in Sacramento. I'd called ahead to explain the situation, and Jennifer had prepared a comprehensive file of evidence showing my mother's interference in their relationship with Tyler. I saved every text message and email from your mother over the past 18 months. Jennifer said, spreading printouts across her dining room table. Look at the progression of her stories. The messages showed a clear pattern of escalation. Initially, Dorothy had simply suggested that Tyler needed time to adjust before visiting Sacramento. Within months, her messages described Tyler as struggling with behavioral issues that made travel inadvisable. By this year, she was claiming Tyler had been diagnosed with severe adjustment disorder and required controlled environment protocols. She convinced us that maintaining distance was therapeutic for Tyler, Jennifer said. We stopped pushing for visits because we thought we were helping his recovery process. Jennifer showed me photographs of the gifts she'd sent through Dorothy's house gifts Tyler had never received. Science kits, books, art supplies, and clothing totaling thousands of dollars had been intercepted and presumably discarded. The most manipulative part was how she positioned herself as Tyler's advocate, Jennifer continued. She claimed to be protecting him from overwhelming situations, while secretly ensuring he remained isolated from people who actually loved him. Jennifer's parents, Tyler's maternal grandparents, had driven down from Oregon to participate in our meeting. They'd brought additional evidence of Dorothy's interference, including recorded voicemail messages, where she'd discouraged their involvement in Tyler's life. She told us you preferred to limit Tyler's family connections during his treatment period, Tyler's maternal grandfather said. We respected what we thought were your wishes, but now we realize we abandoned our grandson when he needed us most. Sarah's family offered to provide sworn statements about Dorothy's deception and their willingness to support Tyler through legal proceedings if necessary. They also volunteered to testify about Tyler's actual behavior during the limited interactions they'd managed before Dorothy's interference. That evening, I called Uncle Robert to test whether family members were open to hearing the truth about the situation. Robert had always been more thoughtful than the rest of my extended family, and his response would indicate whether everyone had been completely manipulated. Robert, I need to ask you directly. During your personal interactions with Tyler, have you observed the behavioral problems Mom described to you? There was a long pause. Now that you mention it, I haven't actually spent time alone with Tyler in over a year. Dorothy always manages the family gatherings, and lately she's been saying Tyler isn't ready for group activities. What was Tyler like the last time you had a real conversation with him? Sweet kid. Quiet but polite and thoughtful. He asked me about my work as a carpenter and seemed genuinely interested in learning about building things. Robert's voice grew uncertain. Abram, are you telling me Dorothy's been misrepresenting Tyler's condition? I explained the situation carefully, providing specific examples of Tyler's actual behavior versus Dorothy's characterizations. Robert listened with growing alarm. Jesus, Abram. I've been spreading Dorothy's version to other family members because I trusted her judgment. If what you're saying is true, we've all participated in isolating a grieving child based on lies. Robert agreed to help document the true family situation and reach out to other relatives who'd been manipulated by Dorothy's campaign. He also offered to host alternative family gatherings where Tyler would be welcomed and celebrated. Wednesday morning, Walsh called with concerning news. Your mother contacted Child Protective Services yesterday, filing a formal report claiming Tyler is being neglected and showing signs of severe emotional disturbance. The blood drained from my face. What exactly did she report? According to CPS, she claimed Tyler has been displaying violent behavior. You've been refusing to seek appropriate medical care, and she's concerned for his safety and development. A caseworker named Amanda Torres is scheduled to visit your home Friday morning. Walsh's tone grew reassuring. Don't panic. We're prepared for this. Your documentation package proves Tyler's well-being and exposes your mother's manipulation campaign. This false report might actually work in your favor by demonstrating her willingness to weaponize child services against your family. What should I expect during the CPS visit? Complete honesty. Show Torres your evidence file. Let her interview Tyler in a comfortable setting. Your documentation will prove that this report was filed maliciously by someone with a history of making false claims about Tyler's condition. Thursday night, I sat Tyler down to prepare him for the CPS visit without frightening him about the implications. Tomorrow, a nice lady named Mrs. Torres is going to visit us to make sure you're happy and healthy. She might ask you questions about our life together and how you feel about different things. Tyler looked concerned. Is this because Grandma thinks I'm bad? The question broke my heart because it revealed Tyler's awareness of the broader situation. This is because some adults want to make sure all children are safe and loved. You just need to tell the truth about how you feel and what your life is like with me. Will she ask about the car thing and the bathroom dinner? She might ask about your experiences with different family members. Just tell her exactly what happened, okay? As Tyler went to bed, I realized that Friday's CPS visit would determine whether my family's manipulation campaign succeeded in destroying our life together. Everything I'd worked for since Sarah's death, every effort to create stability and love for my son, hung in the balance of one interview with a stranger who held the power to tear us apart. But as I reviewed the evidence file Walsh and I had compiled, I felt confident that the truth would prevail. Tyler's teachers, doctors, counselors, and Sarah's family all provided consistent testimony about his well-being and my competent parenting. Meanwhile, Dorothy's claims would crumble under professional scrutiny because they were based on deliberate lies rather than observed reality. The war my mother had started was about to end, but not in the way she'd planned. Friday morning arrived with unusual clarity, as if the universe had decided to provide perfect conditions for the most important conversation of my life. Amanda Torres arrived at our house at 10 o'clock, sharp, a professional woman in her 40s, carrying a briefcase and wearing an expression of careful neutrality. Mr. Abram, thank you for accommodating this visit. I'm here to follow up on a report we received expressing concern about Tyler's well-being. I'd like to start by speaking with you privately, then meet with Tyler and finally observe your home environment. I led Torres to our living room, where I'd arranged the comprehensive documentation file Walsh and I had compiled. Before we begin, I need you to understand that the report you received was filed by someone with a history of making false claims about my son. I have extensive evidence that this is part of a deliberate harassment campaign. Torres opened her notebook, maintaining professional reserve. Can you tell me about the specific concerns that were reported? I was told the report claimed Tyler displays violent behavior, that I refuse appropriate medical care, and that his safety and development are at risk. All of these claims are demonstrably false. I opened the evidence file and began presenting documentation systematically. School records showed Tyler's excellent academic performance and positive behavior reports. Medical records from Dr. Kim proved Tyler's healthy development and appropriate grief processing. Character references from Sarah's family contradicted every aspect of Dorothy's narrative. Mrs. Torres Tyler has never displayed violent behavior in any setting. His teacher's pediatrician and school counselor all describe him as gentle, thoughtful, and well-adjusted considering his circumstances. Torres reviewed the documents carefully, taking detailed notes. This is quite comprehensive. Can you explain the context that led to this report being filed? I explained the systematic exclusion Tyler had endured, the financial manipulation my family had orchestrated, and the campaign of false reports Dorothy had spread throughout our extended family and community. The person who filed this report has been telling relatives that Tyler is mentally unstable, contacted his school claiming to need information about behavioral problems, and called his pediatrician requesting documentation for psychiatric evaluation. All of these inquiries were made without my knowledge or permission. Torres studied the timeline I'd created showing Dorothy's escalating false claims. These documented inquiries do suggest a pattern of someone building a case rather than expressing genuine concern. Mrs. Torres, my mother, filed this CPS report because I've decided to end the financial support I've been providing to her household. For 2 years, I've been paying their mortgage and other expenses, while they emotionally abused my son by excluding him from family activities. I showed Torres the bank records documenting the financial transfers and explained how the money had been used to support Patricia's family while funding Tyler's systematic exclusion. The timing isn't coincidental. 3 days ago, I informed my parents that I would be ending all financial assistance. Yesterday, they filed a false report with your agency. Torres spent 40 minutes reviewing evidence before asking to meet with Tyler. I called him into the living room, where he appeared calm and curious about our visitor. "Hi, Tyler. I'm Mrs. Torres. I work with an organization that makes sure children are safe and happy. Can you tell me about your life here with your dad?" Tyler settled into his favorite chair and answered with the straightforward honesty that had always characterized his personality. He described our daily routines, his school activities, his friends, and his feelings about living with me. "Do you feel safe in your home?" "Yes. Dad takes good care of me. We cook together and read books and play games. He helps me with homework and listens when I'm sad about Mom." Torres asked about his relationships with extended family members, and Tyler's responses provided heartbreaking clarity about the abuse he'd endured. "Grandma Dorothy says I embarrass the family because I act weird since Mom died. Aunt Patricia says I'm different from Madison and Cooper because they know how to behave properly at family events." Tyler described the restaurant incident, the bathroom dinner, the birthday party exclusion, and multiple other episodes with matter-of-fact sadness. He wasn't angry or dramatic. He simply reported experiences that had taught him to expect rejection from people who should have loved him unconditionally. "How do you feel when these things happen?" "Sad, and confused because I don't know what I did wrong. Dad says I didn't do anything wrong, but they keep telling me I need to get better before I can be part of the family again." Torres asked Tyler to show her around our house, and he proudly gave her a tour of his room, pointing out his books, toys, and the photo of Sarah we kept on his nightstand. She observed him preparing his own snack, completing homework independently, and interacting with our neighbor's cat through the window. Tyler seems to be a healthy, well-adjusted child who's processing grief appropriately, Torres told me after Tyler returned to his room. His descriptions of family exclusion are concerning, but his relationship with you appears strong and supportive. Torres spent another 30 minutes observing our home environment, checking safety features, food availability, cleanliness, and Tyler's personal space. Everything met or exceeded child welfare standards. "Mr. Abram, based on my assessment today, I see no evidence supporting the concerns that were reported. Tyler appears to be thriving in your care, and your documentation raises serious questions about the motivations behind this report." Relief flooded through me, but Torres wasn't finished. "However, I am concerned about the pattern of false claims being made about Tyler's behavior. If these reports continue, it could constitute harassment of your family. I'd recommend documenting any future incidents and considering legal action if the pattern persists." Torres explained that she would be closing the case with a finding of unfounded, and that Dorothy's report would be flagged in their system as potentially malicious. If future reports were filed by the same person, they would be viewed with extreme skepticism. I'll also be contacting the reporting party to discuss our findings and make clear that filing false reports is a serious offense that can result in criminal charges. After Torres left, I called Walsh to report the successful resolution of the CPS investigation. He was pleased but warned that Dorothy's desperation might lead to escalation. "People like your mother don't accept defeat gracefully. When manipulation fails, they sometimes resort to more extreme measures. Be prepared for her to increase pressure on family members or attempt more dramatic interventions." That afternoon, my phone began ringing with calls from family members who'd apparently been contacted by Dorothy in a panic. She was mobilizing everyone she'd previously manipulated, trying to convince them to pressure me into maintaining financial support. Uncle Robert called first. Dorothy reached out saying you're having some kind of breakdown and making irrational decisions that will hurt the whole family. She wants me to organize an intervention. What did you tell her? I told her I'd spoken with you recently and you seemed completely rational. I also mentioned that you'd raised some concerning questions about Tyler's treatment. She got very defensive and hung up. Patricia called an hour later, her voice shrill with panic. Mom says you're destroying the family over imaginary problems with Tyler. She thinks you might be having a mental health crisis and need professional help. Patricia, a CPS caseworker, spent 3 hours investigating Tyler's welfare today. She found no evidence supporting any of the concerns your mother reported. In fact, she expressed concern about the pattern of false claims being made against our family. The silence that followed was telling. Patricia hadn't expected the CPS investigation to exonerate me completely. Look, maybe we all overreacted about Tyler's behavior, she said finally. Kids go through phases, and he's probably growing out of whatever issues he was having. Can't we just go back to normal family activities? Normal for whom Tyler spent 3 hours locked in a car while you celebrated Madison's achievements. That's not normal. That's abuse. Don't be so dramatic. We were trying to manage a difficult situation. Maybe we made some mistakes, but we can do better going forward. Patricia's attempt to minimize months of systematic exclusion as mistakes revealed that she still didn't understand the severity of what they'd done to Tyler. That evening, Tyler asked about the day's events. Was Mrs. Torres checking to see if I'm as bad as Grandma says? Mrs. Torres was making sure you're safe and happy. She told me you're a wonderful boy who's doing great despite missing Mom so much. Tyler thought about this for a moment. Does this mean I don't have to sit in cars anymore during family dinners? You're never going to be excluded from anything because of who you are. If people can't accept and love you exactly as you are, then we'll find people who can. As Tyler went to bed, I realized that tomorrow would bring the final confrontation with my parents. The CPS investigation had failed, their manipulation campaign was unraveling, and their financial security was about to disappear. Dorothy's last card had been played and lost. Now she would learn that the price of abusing my child was losing everything I'd been providing to make her comfortable retirement possible. Saturday morning, I drove to my parents' house carrying a folder containing bank statements, a letter from Attorney Walsh, and copies of all the documentation that had proven Tyler's well-being to CPS. The autumn air felt crisp with possibility, and for the first time in months, I felt completely certain about the path forward. I knocked on their front door and waited calmly as Dorothy answered, her face immediately shifting to defensive anger when she saw me. Abram, if you're here to cause drama about yesterday's misunderstanding with that government woman, I don't want to hear it. We were only trying to help Tyler get the support he needs. May I come in? We need to discuss the financial arrangements and your relationship with Tyler. Dorothy stepped aside reluctantly, and I found Frank sitting at their kitchen table reading the newspaper. He looked up nervously as I entered, clearly aware that this conversation would determine their immediate future. Dad, Mom, I'm here to inform you that I'm ending all financial support effective immediately. No more mortgage payments, insurance premiums, medical copays, or emergency assistance. The color drained from Dorothy's face. You can't be serious. We depend on that money to survive. Your father's pension barely covers our basic expenses. You should have considered that before systematically abusing my son and filing false reports with Child Protective Services. I opened my folder and placed the CPS case closure document on their table. Mrs. Torres spent 3 hours investigating Tyler's welfare yesterday. She found zero evidence supporting any of your claims. In fact, she expressed concern about the pattern of false reporting and warned that future incidents could result in criminal charges. Frank picked up the document with shaking hands. Criminal charges? Filing false reports with CPS is a felony in California. Attorney Walsh is documenting every instance of harassment and defamation you've directed toward my family. If it continues, we'll pursue both criminal and civil remedies. Dorothy's defensive anger crumbled into desperate panic. Abram, you're overreacting to family disagreements. We can work through this. Tyler is welcome at family gatherings going forward. Tyler has always been welcome everywhere loving families gather. The problem was never with Tyler's behavior. It was with your decision to treat a grieving child as an embarrassment to be hidden away. I pulled out copies of the school records, medical reports, and character references that had been presented to CPS. Every professional who works with Tyler describes him as well-behaved, academically excellent, and emotionally healthy. The only people claiming he has behavioral problems are you and Patricia. Frank studied the documents with growing understanding. Dorothy, these teachers and doctors all say Tyler is doing fine. Why did you tell everyone he was having serious problems? Because he was different after Sarah died, Dorothy said defensively. Children should be resilient, not dwelling on sadness for years. He needed to learn proper emotional control. He needed love and support while processing the most devastating experience of his life. Instead, you taught him that grief was shameful and love was conditional on perfect behavior. I placed Tyler's drawing on the table, the one showing a small figure standing outside while others sat around a table. This is what you did to my son. You made him believe he was too flawed to deserve inclusion in his own family. Dorothy stared at the drawing, and for a moment her expression softened. But then her jaw set stubbornly. We were trying to help him develop resilience. Coddling children doesn't prepare them for real life. Emotional abuse doesn't build resilience. It destroys self-worth and teaches children that love must be earned through perfect compliance. Frank looked between the evidence documents and Tyler's drawing with dawning horror. Dorothy, what have we done? That little boy lost his mother and we made him feel unwanted by his own family. Don't be dramatic, Frank. We provided structure and boundaries. If Abram had been willing to address Tyler's issues properly, none of this would have been necessary. Her refusal to acknowledge the harm they'd caused confirmed that Dorothy would never change her perspective. She viewed Tyler's exclusion as justified intervention rather than cruel rejection. I've calculated the total financial support I've provided over the past 2 years. I continued. $38,000 that enabled your comfortable lifestyle while you systematically destroyed my son's sense of belonging. I placed the bank statements on the table. $15,000 of that money was passed along to Patricia for her children's private education. So I was unknowingly funding my niece and nephew's opportunities while you excluded Tyler from basic family inclusion. The mathematical reality of their manipulation hit Frank like a physical blow. We took your money and used it to support Patricia's kids while treating Tyler like damaged goods. Frank, we were managing multiple family needs, Dorothy said, but her voice lacked conviction. Mom, you convinced me that Tyler needed professional help. You told relatives he was violent and unstable. You called his school and doctor spreading lies about his behavior. You filed a false report with Child Protective Services claiming I was neglecting him. I stood up, preparing to leave. This wasn't concern for Tyler's well-being. This was a systematic campaign to remove him from the family while maintaining the financial benefits of your relationship with me. Dorothy's last pretense of righteousness collapsed into pure desperation. Where are we supposed to live without your help? The mortgage payment is due in 2 weeks, and we don't have $800, much less $850. You'll figure it out the same way other people manage their finances without emotionally abusing children. As I walked toward the door, Frank followed me outside. Abram, please. Your mother made mistakes, but losing our home won't undo the hurt Tyler experienced. Can't we find some middle ground? Dad, the middle ground would have been treating Tyler with basic human decency while accepting my financial help. Instead, you chose to enable emotional abuse for 2 years. Frank's eyes filled with tears. I knew Dorothy was being too harsh with the boy, but I was afraid to challenge her because we needed your support so badly. I'm a coward who let financial desperation override my moral obligations. His admission of complicity was heartbreaking but insufficient. Tyler needed at least one grandparent to protect him from the abuse. Instead, you both participated in teaching him that love was conditional on meeting impossible standards. Is there any way to earn forgiveness? Any chance to rebuild a relationship with Tyler? That depends entirely on your willingness to acknowledge the full scope of what you've done and make genuine amends. Tyler will decide if and when he wants grandparents in his life. Driving away from their house, I felt the enormous weight of family obligation finally lifting from my shoulders. For 2 years, I'd been trapped between loyalty and protection, trying to maintain relationships that were poisoning my son's sense of self-worth. That afternoon, I called Jennifer to share the news and coordinate Tyler's reintroduction to Sarah's family. We planned a weekend visit to Sacramento, where Tyler could experience unconditional love and acceptance from relatives who actually wanted him present. I also contacted Uncle Robert, who was organizing a family barbecue specifically designed to welcome Tyler and celebrate his place in the extended family. Robert had spent the week calling relatives, explaining Dorothy's manipulation, and ensuring that future gatherings would center around inclusion rather than exclusion. Sunday morning, Tyler and I attended church services, where Carol had arranged for the congregation to formally welcome Tyler as a valued member of their community. The pastor spoke about the importance of protecting vulnerable children and creating inclusive families built on love rather than conditions. Over the following weeks, Tyler's transformation was remarkable. With the toxic influence of Dorothy and Patricia removed from his life, his natural resilience and joy began to emerge. He started sleeping better, laughing more frequently, and engaging confidently with classmates and teachers. His grades already good improved to exceptional levels. He joined the school science club and began taking piano lessons, reconnecting with his mother's musical legacy without shame or apology for his emotional responses. Most importantly, Tyler stopped apologizing for his own existence. He no longer asked if he was acting weird or worried about embarrassing people with his presence. The child who'd drawn pictures of himself standing alone outside family gatherings began creating artwork showing himself surrounded by people who celebrated his uniqueness. 6 months later, Patricia reached out requesting a conversation. Her family's financial situation had deteriorated significantly after losing Dorothy and Frank's support, and she'd been forced to confront the reality of her actions toward Tyler. "I owe you and Tyler an enormous apology," she said during our carefully structured meeting at a neutral location. "I got caught up in Mom's narrative about Tyler being problematic, and I let my own financial stress override my moral judgment." Patricia's acknowledgement was a beginning, but rebuilding trust would require consistent demonstration of change rather than words. Tyler would decide if and when he wanted a relationship with his aunt, and that decision would be respected regardless of family pressure. Meanwhile, Dorothy and Frank's situation had stabilized at a much lower standard of living. They'd downsized to a small apartment and learned to live within their actual means. Dorothy continued to maintain that her treatment of Tyler was justified, but Frank had begun therapy to address his role in enabling the abuse. A year later, Tyler stood before his 4th grade class presenting his family tree project. Instead of apologizing for a complicated family situation, he proudly described the network of love and support that surrounded him: his father, Sarah's family, Uncle Robert's branch of the paternal family church community members, and neighbors who'd become chosen family. "Some people think families have to look a certain way," Tyler said with confidence that would have been impossible 2 years earlier. "But I think families are just groups of people who love each other no matter what." That evening, as I tucked Tyler into bed, he asked, "Dad, do you think Mom would be proud of how we handled everything with Grandma Dorothy? I think Mom would be amazed by your strength and proud of the kind, thoughtful person you're becoming, despite facing such difficult challenges." Tyler smiled with the quiet confidence of a child who knows he's unconditionally loved. "I'm glad we chose the people who choose us back. The journey from that tearful evening in the gas station parking lot to Tyler's confident self-acceptance had required the most difficult decision of my life. Choosing my son over family loyalty protection, over financial security, and truth over comfortable lies had seemed impossible at the time. But watching Tyler thrive in an environment built on authentic love, rather than conditional acceptance, I realized that some choices aren't really choices at all. When someone you love is being harmed, there's only one right path forward, regardless of the cost. Tyler learned that love doesn't require earning or maintaining through perfect behavior. He discovered that healthy families celebrate differences rather than demanding conformity. Most importantly, he experienced the life-changing power of being chosen and protected by someone who put his well-being above all other considerations. The greatest lesson came not from the pain of family betrayal, but from the healing that followed when we chose to build our lives around people who genuinely valued our presence. Tyler's story became one of resilience recovery and the profound impact of unconditional love in helping a child reclaim his sense of worth. As I reflect on this experience, I want to ask you something that might resonate with your own family relationships. Have you ever had to choose between keeping peace with relatives and protecting someone you love from their harmful behavior? Sometimes, the most loving thing we can do is set firm boundaries, even when it comes at great personal cost. Your thoughts and experiences matter, so please share them in the comments below. If this story moved you or reminded you of the importance of protecting vulnerable family members, please like this video and subscribe for more real-life stories about family courage and healing. Share this with anyone who might need to hear that choosing love over loyalty is sometimes the bravest decision we can make. Thank you for listening, and remember that every child deserves to be celebrated exactly as they are.